All right, it's nice to see everybody. Let's see, on Monday, we went over a couple of things. We just introduced ourselves, however we would like to. And then we talked about which language or languages we are working in. And then we listed one thing among our peoples, however you want to identify that you think needs to remain the same, and then one thing that you think needs to change. And if I were to ask you to set a target goal, which would, and you don't have to share this yet, but we'll talk about this throughout the semester. 30 years from now, what's a good number? And you got to be kind of realistic. Like what's a number of speakers where you feel like you would have accomplished your goals? So if your language has 100 speakers, if in 30 years you have 100, maybe you feel like that's okay. Maybe you feel like that's not enough. But if a population of the folks who are descendants of the language, if there were 10,000 of them, and if you had 30 speakers right now, if you said we'll have 10,000 speakers in 30 years, you might be setting yourself up for some not quite reaching your goals. So it's a bit of a give and take there. But whatever, just think of that number, and we'll talk throughout the semester about what should that number be, and how do we kind of calculate what that number should be. But whatever you envision that number is, you don't have to share it with us. What do you think needs to stay the same among your peoples, and what do you think needs to change? If you've already shared this, we're here to listen. So if you didn't have a chance to go on Monday, that's what we'll start off with today. Then we'll move into, we'll take a look at the notes that I take in preparing a conversation for this class. But then I'll also ask you, what are you hoping to cover today? Because I've got my plan, and I'll show it to you. And if you got things you want to add to it, let's do it. 90 minutes does go by pretty fast, but I think we can have things and put them in the parking lot if we need to, where we come back to them later. So anybody want to share introduction and these two, the language or languages and these two things?
I can go. I didn't go on Monday. Godam Tibin Dewayu, Ligi Victoria Mccoy, Shuam, Ganhada Diwa Hoshku, Ada Alice Modignoyu, Ada Dugmodig Nagwadu. My Simshan name is Godam Tibin, part of his sea lion. My English name is Victoria Mccoy. I'm of the Raven clan, and I'm the daughter of Alice Modig and Doug Modig. One of the things that I like about Shamalia is that I don't think needs to change is that everybody works together. Especially during COVID times, we're able to work with people from our traditional territories of Canada, and we have people we can talk to in Akwan Ani. We have the Juno Shamalia Learners Group. So I think that is good that we have a lot of resources. One of the things that I would like to see change is the rate of pay for teachers. I know a lot of people put in like their hearts and their souls into teaching, and it's something they would do for free, but when teachers make less than, I would say 30,000 is like a high paying for teachers, and that's pretty much living in poverty if you have kids and mortgage payments. Another thing that I would like to see change is speakers taking more initiative. Like I teach my brothers and sisters every Sunday, and I prepare lesson plans for them. But I don't feel they really, like they're not remembering what I tell them. Like when I hear elders speak, I really take it to heart. But my brothers and sisters and other speakers, they take it for granted that somebody else is going to do the work. So, Lugon Deutschem.
Deutsch. Yeah, there's a couple of really excellent points in there that I think will just sort of, there's going to be some big concepts that I think float throughout the entire semester. One of them falls under this category, I think, of language prestige, which is a complicated category. So language prestige for me is, does the language have a value among the people? And oftentimes we have to ask ourselves some really hard conversations, which is often, do we value it more than just saying that it's important? Um, which is, it's a tough thing. And one of the reasons why I would say that is because sometimes we have to say, how do we get the people to love the language enough to do the thing? Which is, it's not the people's fault. We have colonization, we have so much systemic devaluing of our languages. But sometimes it is a practical, there's a practical side of it, which I think is, yeah. Uh, I was invited to give a talk down on the Wind River Reservation. Wonderful people, wonderful place. And at one point, somebody came up to talk to me afterwards and said, so, I'd really love to get someone to teach the language in the schools, but they want to get paid. And if they loved it, they would do it. And I said, well, okay, that's a really interesting thing because I don't think you think the same about other things, and that reveals something. I said, okay, when your school year ends, go up to to your history teacher in your high school and say, okay, next year we're not going to pay you to do this, but if you love history, you will continue to do this. And see what they say. And just see how you feel about even saying that. And then ask yourself why you can say that about indigenous languages. But this is what happens through systemic exclusion, that it's just not even part of the conversation, which is part of the cultural hegemony of education. So I do think it takes some deliberate shifts of that. And for some people, the criticism is going to be, you all just want to make $1 million. You want to just get rich off of our language. But I believe a language teacher, that should be a six-figure salary. Why is that less important than other things? And there's an awkward discussion of capitalism and money and value in here, but I think also you can end up with a message saying you can value this, and or you can go do something where you'll have a much higher income. But finding that thing in between, like what is that in between value? And as a side note, I was really grumpy the other day. Uh, Sometimes I get these long-standing uh, revenge ideas. I had a junior high school teacher who I can't remember how he was. It was that's a going back quite a ways, probably 35 years or so. And I used to like to draw in class when I would be in class. It helped me listen. I would draw pictures, I would write notes, I would do all kinds of stuff. And he would make fun of me. He'd say, "Are you doodling again?" And I said, "Well, I'm drawing. I like to draw. I'm listening to you. I can tell you what you were just saying." And he said, "Well, I hope that gets you somewhere someday." But he was being sarcastic and making fun of me in front of everybody. And then sometimes I want to find him and just sort of say, "Actually, it got me somewhere. Like I'm an artist, and what you did was mean, and you shouldn't do that to kids." But then I was like, and that's one thing. But then the second thing was, we were in a class, the same teacher, and this one girl was just talking the whole time to her friend. So he finally got mad at her and kicked her out of the class. And um, and then she went down to the principal's office. And when she left, he started yelling at us about how much she was talking. And I thought it was funny because I didn't do anything. So I laughed because I was like, why are we getting yelled at? And I laughed because I thought it was silly. And he said, "You think this is funny?" And he came over and he knocked the books off my desk and he went back to punch me in the face. I was probably 10, 11 years old now. How old you are in seventh grade? And so I got real mad and I just pushed my desk over and just laughed. But I always thought, and then I thought, I should find this guy and get a hold of him and just say just how mean he was. That was all I was going to do. And I couldn't, and I think I found maybe his name, but I found this list of teachers in the school district in Anchorage in, what was it, 1986. And I found his name, and he was making over $100,000 a year. So how much our teachers, and if you just sort of average out the salary, and I'm not saying teachers should not be making this kind of money. I think teachers should be making more. I really like that skit where there was like it was a comedy skit where people were drafting teachers and signing them to multi-million-dollar deals like they would an athlete. And you know, athletes, a lot of people pay to watch it. Yes, it's good stuff. They should make that money. But the language teachers, I think, are way outside of this conversation, and we need to have this conversation. So that's a lot of the initiative behind making Alaska Native languages co-official, and then having certifications for teachers and speakers. And then the next step is to be part of the educational standards. I think if you graduate high school or college in Alaska, you should have 1 year of Alaska Native languages. I don't care who you are, where you're from, where you're at. Because if we just put ourselves as part of the standard, then we keep pushing ourselves into that conversation. Say this thing's just as important as that thing. Whatever they make, that's what we make. And it's a lot of work, and it's legitimate work. But our own people sometimes get on the wrong side of these conversations. So I have relatives, and some of them are in pretty high positions in our Indigenous organizations. And I said, let me pitch this idea to you. I said, and this was 10 years ago, when we still had 5 to 10 really active elders who are working in the Tlingit language here in Juneau. I said, we only got like 5 elders that really do all the work. And I go visit them, and they live in trailers and 1-bedroom apartments because they chose to do the language for their whole life. And they didn't choose the path where all the money was. But I said, we're in charge of the money. We have so much money right now. We're not the wealthiest people in the world, but we do have money. What if we took these elders who were working with us, we just gave them a house? So, you know, this is your nice house, your big house, and we give them $50,000 a year. Don't do any timesheets, don't do anything. That's just how much money you make. And that was it. 50. That was it. And I said, they just tell us when they're tired. And the response to this proposal was, social welfare doesn't work. That's a Native person who said that to me. I said, it's not welfare, it's work. Who else is going to do this? We're just going to lose so much. And so I know we're trying not to have these conversations sometimes of losing everything and the loss of it. But I think sometimes we got to look at what's the value. And I think about this stuff all the time. I was having a conversation with someone else who is a really ambitious leader and thinks of like really different ideas. And this person and I were sitting down, having coffee, talking about ideas. And he was saying, well, what if we made like a reality TV show? And I was like, well, that sounds kind of silly. I'm not a big fan of all these shows about Alaska. He's like, but they're interesting. They got a lot of momentum right now. I was like, okay, what are we talking? He's like, well, what if you had a bunch of people and they had to be in this immersion environment, and if they kept speaking English, they'd have to go home. And the ones who won got like $50,000. I was like, what? Okay, let's do that thing. You know, and so, but also, when a student takes 1 year of your language classes, and we haven't figured this out, what happens? Do we celebrate them? Do we put them up in front of the people? Do we show them that this is important? If someone takes the whole sequence of the language, what if we just cut them a check for 10 grand? I don't know where the money comes from, but like, there's money out there. There's people that, you know, there's got to be something on the other side, because I know we want people to value it. We want it to be important at a philosophical level, spiritual level, sentimental level. But also, I think, and being people of the Northwest Coast, we would put money on things. We would put copper on things. And that's how we said it was valuable. And I think if we push more towards that direction and figure that out, you know, it becomes something as well, saying, this is what you should do. And because you did it, we're gonna hook you up. And so those are really good thoughts. Thank you for sharing those. I know it launched me into a platform. If anyone else have thoughts on that, I know we want to give other folks a chance to introduce themselves.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I'll wait.
No, you can jump in right now.
Oh, I don't have any comment about the discussion question. I'm just wanting to add on to what you're talking about. So I was reading in the newspaper, these young middle school students, they do what's called Bitcoin. They do mining for Bitcoin. And the equipment that they're utilizing are $100,000. They're middle school students. They're making $36,000 per month right now. If our children were learning the Xinca language along with the advancement in science like that, there would be no reason why, as teachers, providing them that education, that we would be, I mean, no one in their right mind would give us $20 or $25 or $35 as teachers in that area. Not to say that we should, but I'm just saying that, there's a lot of things that we can do to make money. And it just seems like these children, they had what they needed. And that was the big point. They had parents who supported them, gave them the money, and they had sponsors that came in and donated equipment. And so, and that's a lot of money. One household, $200,000 worth of equipment. That's pretty expensive. But again, sorry, I just was thinking about that as you were talking, since
Yeah,
we're talking about money.
and I know that there are programs that have paid people who don't speak the language and probably never will to administrate some program or some grant. And they probably paid them an awful lot of money. And then maybe they paid their elders like a few $1,000s. And I think we've got to examine that stuff. So when I would work with elders and I would get paid to do that, what I would do is I'd say, okay, you should pay me $50 an hour. You should pay the elders $100 an hour. And they said, oh, we pay everybody the same rate. Everybody just gets $50 an hour. So then I'd say, okay, well, I worked on this thing for 2 hours, and they worked on this thing for 4 hours. So I would just do it myself. I would just, and I don't know, I'm not really good at the numbers stuff, but I just say, if we're not going to do it, then I'll figure out how to do it. So, because they knew the language. Like I was getting the stuff from them. So, okay. And we can talk about this stuff all semester long, too. There's no easy answers, but I do think there are short, medium, and long-term solutions to a lot of these things. Anybody else not get a chance to say hello to us on Monday? We just want to put names to faces, hear voices, get to know each other a little bit.
Jinkasi, Ichsai. One of the things that I like, that I'd like to stay the same is I appreciate it just in my experience as a language learner and teacher, the short time that I've been in the schools, is the increasing amount of language and culture that's being incorporated into the elementary schools. And I'd like to see that progression to keep going. The one thing that I'd like to change is to see a Tlingit language teacher at every elementary. I think because they're just such sponges and they're so eager to learn that it's so quick to, they're so quick to pick it up. And also sharing, I think sharing language and culture within the students, it allows such an open mind of understanding about other people and other cultures, and especially the people of the land that we're on, that it kind of, I guess what we do say, it eliminates, no, it doesn't eliminate, but it helps stop racism at the root before. It helps prevent misunderstandings or misconceptions or judgments. So just appreciating rather than seeing things the way somebody else tells them to see things, which may be positive or negative. So those are the two things that I liked.
Awesome. Yeah, and that's wonderful. And the other thing too is, as you're doing your work in advocacy and change, is always be conscious of the likelihood of people to think of things like capitalism is so interesting because so few people have so much stuff and then so many people have relatively so little stuff. But also there's always these, it operates under a concept of like always running out of resources. Like you're always running out of time and you're always running out of money and you're always running out of everything. But then you still see people just going into space for fun and all kinds of crazy stuff. And so one of the things that I do think happens a lot in terms of arguments is that we would love to, but we don't have enough blank, especially when it comes to doing more with the languages. One example would be, go back 8 years ago when I was really advocating strongly for developing just a whole language medium school in Tlingit like they have in Hawaii. I was trying to get the school board on it, and I was trying to get the superintendent to say yes. And I had several meetings with school board members, and one of them, who I would say was actually an advocate for what we're trying to do, would just continually say, well, why should we do this when we could increase the amount of language that's in all of the schools? And I would say, why is it one thing or the other? How, just because we built an immersion school for those who want to raise, or a medium school for those who want to raise their children in the language, that doesn't mean you can't have language in the schools. And you don't have enough teachers, and there are some realities about that. But it's so many things get reduced to this one thing or the other type of thought that I just think you always watch out for that. You always be ready to counter that argument, because it's usually pretty easy, because it's not usually based on actual data. Like, nobody knows what would happen if you did this other thing, because nobody's done that other thing. But I think capitalism and modernity position themselves to say, we know what's going to happen. Everything will fall apart. And it just sort of, it operates with that mentality. Anybody else not have a chance to say hello? I'd love to hear your voice, hear your name, hear what you're doing.
Shane, my English name is Aiden Bowers. One thing I would not change about the Tlingit language is just the momentum that we have for our programs. One thing I would change would probably be a family type of program. When we were in Hawaii with the language nest over there, I had walked up and I actually started speaking to them in English, not knowing that it was a all Hawaiian language program. And I just felt like I was surrounded by adults, and some of them were 5, And there was, as we were leaving, they all said, all in unison had, said bye, and it was good to see you. And I didn't know what they said. And one of them ran up to me and whispered in my ear, it was like, it was good to see you. I was like, oh, it was just really good to see. So this is a really great program, but to see more programs that involve that multi-generational family would be really great to see and see in my time. So good to see you.
Yeah, wonderful. Going back, I did this 8-week, it's probably a 6-week, very intensive Hawaiian language learning program. We went probably, I think we went 7 to 8 hours every single day. And we were picking up Hawaiian. I felt like really fast. I was like, man, I think I'm going to get this. And then they brought me into a classroom, and this first grader turned to me and said something. I'm observing their class. And I had to say in Hawaiian, like, say it again, say it again, say it again, say it again. Okay, his brother has the same laptop as mine. Okay, so it took me so long, and these little kids can just, as soon as they see you there for a long time, they just assume, they start calling you uncle, and they, in Hawaiian, and then they talk to you in Hawaiian. Everybody, but that's the thing too, is like creating this culture where everybody should be in the movement, and there shouldn't be any shame with not being in the movement. And then once you're in the movement, everybody speaks to you in the language of the movement. Like and that was one big thing that they took out of Hawaii, is they said we had to redefine a lot of our relationships, because we would learn Hawaiian together, but we would communicate on a day-to-day basis with English as the medium language. So we had to shift that. And they did, because we'd go over there and take classes, and there's me and my buddy who's Mohawk and my buddy who's Chamorro. And they would switch to English for us because we didn't know Hawaiian. And their students would say, it is so weird for you to speak to me in English, because they never did. And so that's another one of the goals, is how do you get to that point where for even the people in the movement, it is the medium of communication, which is a huge step. And I knew it there because once I started learning Hawaiian, I could see people walking at me, and I'm like, they're going to talk to me in Hawaiian. I just know it. I could see it in the way that they're walking at me, and it was beautiful. It's wonderful. Anybody else not get a chance to say hello?
Wanga. Hi. Wanga atira Suzuk. Inupi. Anyway, inupi akta Suzuk nalormi dun atira Mary Huntington. Kirik kami ulunga aglan inunyak tunga pagmami unga alak lang mi. So yes, the doy Harley Huntington ba usa so usa Suzuk Manila katsat hutsan sada nilad Suli Bering Strait School District mi so itunga coordinator of cultural programs. I am Suzuk. I included my English name just for reference. I try not to throw it in so that people don't get in the habit of trying to use it instead because it's easier. But we're statewide, and so I wanted to include the reference to my connection to my husband's language and culture and to incorporate that a little bit. The thing that I had to, there's so many times I want to just reiterate and amen to so many things that have been being said. And so it's actually really nice to be a small voice at the table instead of the one who has to represent and has to make all the validations and all that good stuff. But the two main things that I wanted to say, and I've made a note, so I want to make sure I don't accidentally go on and on and on forever. The biggest thing that I think that we need to keep the same is that we have philosophical support for our languages, and everybody says it in words. It doesn't always translate into time, and it doesn't always translate into action. And so one of the things that I want us to change is how we can make those shifts to make it meaningful, actionable, useful support. One of the things that I think in our district, we give a lot of financial support, but very little time support. And so I think that it's actually more useful to be given time than money. We actually do lots of wonderful things that help the structure, and some of the examples that we were talking about in terms of paying our elders, we do that very beautifully and very systemically. It's built into our structure. It's just a given. And I think we need to continue more along those. One of the biggest things that I think we need to change, because we're all trying real hard and we're learning, but we're not learning the useful part. Like I've been studying and studying and studying Inupiaq for so long, and most of what I say to you I had to memorize first, and then I still can put some pieces of it together, but they're memorized pieces. And so what I think we really need to change is the actual true communication, and we need to make the shift from what's too hard to what's doable, and we need to shift completely from the westernized, colonized approach to teaching about. We say it, but we don't know what we mean when we say it. I was trying to look at some communication, like a first lesson I could do in a half an hour session on learning Inupiaq, and it was going to be, I see something. I see a TV. I see kanya TV, kanya dresser, kanya whatever. And then we don't ever look at the how to say I don't see. So like if I ask you guys, if I say kanya TV, kanya TV, I see a TV. Do you see a TV? And it's then you can, and that was the idea, that it's going to be that easy. Kanarea TV, Kanakpium TV, Kanarea TV, Kanakpium TV, and just go on and on. But like one of the first things that happened when I was doing a lesson like that with kids, they asked, how do I say I don't see it? And I didn't know how. I didn't know how. And even this week when I was looking at how to do that, I thought I knew how. And then when I was going back to research, just for the background information in case I need to talk about, I don't see those things instead of that thing. I realized that even what I had listed as I don't see a TV, I had said Kinyangila, which actually means he doesn't see a TV. I didn't actually say the right way. Kinyangila, I don't see it. And so even that simple. Yes, no, I see it, I don't see it. We teach everything only in the positive. And just because it's a complicated grammatical process, it's not. I mean, we can memorize I see it, I don't see it, and start from there. And the amount of learning that we would just be open to and able to apply on day one. And actually, like, I could go around and say that any random way and show off to anybody and they could understand. But anyway, so that's that success, and that immediate, quick, easy success by not getting bogged down with how we've learned. And same with how almost everything. So the one other thing I wanted to say about what we need to change is to be okay with all the conflicting everythings. So like we say, we need to pay our language mentors appropriately, but we also say we don't want it to just be about money. There is an actual way that we can look at both of those conflicting dynamics and find the balance that feels right in all the scenarios. And so I think that whole world, indigenous worldview of everything is connected and everything is whatever, and it's more about balance than this, like you said, one way or the other way. Well, there's a place for every single little issue that we're bringing up, and it shouldn't be a battle of me against you. It should always be a, how can we make this harmonious? How can we take these conflicting values, needs, and find the balance that makes it feel right? Because feeling right is so much a part of it, even if we don't know how to say why it feels right. As we start in the work, we got to know how to say it. But anyway, those are my 5, 10, 20 cents. And thank you for the chance, and good to meet and see you all. I can't wait. I already am enjoying these last 2 days and look forward to the rest of this time together. Thank you.
Hooray, Foyana. Wonderful. Always good to hear from folks. Thank you so much for sharing. Kachtin, did you have a thought you wanted to share?
Yeah, I went last week, but something, I was thinking about that should change, that I was usually talking about all the time, but is the use of all our different watercraft, dugouts, skin boats, park canoes, having that space of like just our language only should be there. And then so many things would come from that, because that could be just an immersion setting every time. And then, how much of our languages would be enhanced by being on the land and knowing these places that were, like the place names, like the big maps. There should be maps that have all of our place names on there rather than just Tlingit or Haida or Tsimshian. I mean, we were all over the map. Those places should be there and we should learn them. And that's something I think needs to change. And I guess before any of that can happen, we actually have to start making them for classes to use. But that was just something I wanted to mention. That's Cheesh.
Thank you. And thank any. I got a bunch of thoughts, but maybe I'll just say, anybody else not have a chance to share with us who you are, what language or languages you're working in, one thing you'd want to stay the same with your peoples, and one thing that you'd like to change? Just make sure everyone had a chance I think everybody might have gone. There might be one who hasn't.
Hune, my apologies. I'm gach ansan yuchatu asak, and Lori, sorry, I just came off school, so my apologies. First of all, I wanted to thank everyone for allowing me to be a part of this. I teach until 3, and then I have club, and so Hune has been kind enough. Like, this is one thing I would love to keep, so that teachers like me who really want to learn the language and the culture can find opportunities to do so. And so the fact that Hune records all of these, that I can watch them outside of my school contract and try to be a part of it. So that's what happened on Monday. We had a district-wide training, and so my apologies, but I got to watch all of your sharing. So a lot of it is on top of what I've heard. You know, I heard you spoke very powerfully about what needs to be, you know, how we need to change what we teach and the content. And I agree with that as a change. I love that we have a cultural specialist at every school, and I would love to see a language teacher. I also see the stress that puts on those 2 individuals to serve, like feeling like you're trying to hold up the language and the culture for everyone. And so as a teacher, I think having these opportunities for all of the school district staff to find a way to learn the language and culture and not have to put so much, share that load as much as possible, if that makes sense. And it's not a load, share this gift, I should say, share this gift. And if there was some way we could all, like, there's so many great things being produced and done in different programs, and I wondered if there was just a way that we could all come together and share these materials and put them online if it was possible, so that somebody who really wanted to bring the language and culture in would have the support, whether there was a person physically there or that there were these online materials. So when Iskanashkla shared that, like, media, I think that will allow many people who wish they had an opportunity to learn the language and culture can do it. Khune, even that you have the intermediate Tlingit language, I mean, I watched that all this summer so that I could feel more confident joining intermediate Tlingit this fall, so that I don't quit. I mean, I'm being really honest, and I just want to be successful, and I think that's where a lot of teachers are. They don't want to offend. They don't want to do it wrong. And so if there was a way that all of this knowledge that everyone has could be, you know, accessible, so that we can see it many times over, practice it many times over, and helps teach it in a way that's appropriate. Yeah, that would be my hope, because I know we're 40 fluent Tlingit speakers and even less for some of the other indigenous languages. And I think there's a lot of people out there who want to help, but just don't know how to do it. So I'm going to chish for having these materials up, because Khune, I'm on there all the time with your Google folder and See Alaska and Gold Belt. And I'm just wondering if we could have a concerted effort. So, like, okay, you're working on this, then we'll fill the gap here, so that we're not duplicating all of this precious time, but really be intentional about what hasn't been done yet, who can do this, and that we all come together to make good use of our time and really reach as many kids and adults as possible. Gonna cheese.
Sheesh. And Heather, I see your hands up. Did you have a thought?
Yes, thanks, Claude. I spoke the other day, but I've been thinking about, as a perspective, as a person who prepares teachers, I think the macro level accountability has to change. Internationally, nationally, local, state, federal, everything. But as far as like the university and the pre-K through 12 school system here, there has to be more accountability. There has to be awareness, understanding, and then, like you were saying the other day, an apology, and then a paradigm shift. And in my world, there isn't the false dichotomy of whether we can have this or that, because that's a Western thing, I think. And I think we need more language teachers, and a language teacher in every classroom would be ideal. Having a strength-based curriculum with a medicine wheel instead of Bloom's taxonomy, not having compartmentalized education, having project-based, like intellectual authorities are shared as gifts, and it's not just a Western philosophy of education, it's different philosophies of education, and it's based on a project, and like you're working on something in real life. Like I've seen so many examples on Sea Alaska Heritage or the Alaska Native Knowledge Network, of berry picking or the halibut hook lesson, where students are engaging in all types of academic rigor, and that would meet any standard in any intellectual authority, and they're actually having fun and learning in a way that's holistic and real. So I think I really hope that the society, with the momentum we have to change, like working with the BOR, for instance, Gloria O'Neill initiated an Alaska Native Success Initiative, and the board is excited, and the regents are saying they want to save Alaska Native languages. They're going to an equity conference. And I think that there is, like Lori was saying, people want to help, but they're so far don't understand it. Thank you, sorry, I used the acronym, the Board of Regents. They just don't understand it, much like many school administrators. And like Lori said, there's pockets of amazing things going on. And if we could just bring those together and bring attention to it, I'm always saying Alaska is the biggest small town we have. And if we could be hugely successful if we all shared, if we made a safe space for like the College of Alaska Native Languages, where we could grow Alaska Native languages, we could grow to Indigenous languages and become a center for Indigenous studies. I mean, prestigious centers for Indigenous studies don't have to be in New Jersey. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it being in New Jersey, but I just think that there's so much out there that we can do. Anyway, thank you, sorry.
No, wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing. Okay, last, Duck Juice, I saw you had your hand up a while back, sorry.
Oh, yeah. Just real quick, the topic of it feels right.
Mhm.
I'm a firm believer that our ancestors are helping us on our journey, and they already know what's best for us. And so when we reach a point in a discussion or whatever it is,
Mhm.
with our languages, and we get to a moment where it feels right, I believe that's because the ancestors already know what's best and what's right,
Right.
and they're waiting for us to realize, you know, the right choice and going with that. And when we do, we get that feeling that it feels right.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm going to show you that we've been touching on a couple things that are really critical components, and we're going to move into the readings as well. But I kind of want to jump ahead into something that I was going to show you folks today. And we're going to talk, I put in the chat two links to this. I will put these images up on our Blackboard page as well. If you want me to email it to you directly, just let me know. I'll drop it in an email. There's kind of these, when I was doing the program in Hawaii, we were having a bunch of conversations about language and social change and education. Those were probably like the major conversations, everything related back to that. We did one semester of kind of overall linguistic concepts, but it's not a linguistics centered program. And we could talk about what does that mean. Well, linguistics is, I think of linguistics as very similar to anthropology and archaeology, where it's a Eurocentric view of indigenous peoples. That's what I think anthropology is. And if people want to fight me, then they can go imagine that they're doing that, because I don't care. But as you shift from anthropology to indigenous studies, you also shift from linguistics to language revitalization. So a language revitalization program is all I'm really interested in. There's a lot of principles, though, from linguistics that I think are important. So a lot of things that we're talking about here is like, if you could make this the language of day-to-day communication, you got it. You got, I mean, that's the whole thing, across generations, in homes, in the community. But, you know, really trying to just boil it down to what is that? And I think sort of, for me, one of the things I really took out from conversations over there is, my recommendation is you have two goals. And these two goals, and you can have a lot of sub-goals, but your primary two goals is protect the speakers you have while making new ones. That's it. So you've got existing speakers. By protecting them, that means you got to take care of them. You got to spoil them. You got to get them talking. You got to lean on them. You got to get the ones who can really understand the language to go visit with them, record a bunch of stuff. There's a whole bunch of stuff you got to do. And you have to make speakers. And so it's not enough. It's a start to get people interested and have them. You know, there's a lot of people who could tell you all about the Tlingit language. Like, oh yeah, it's got these classifiers and these pronouns, this is really cool stuff. But if you just say, okay, talk to me in the language, like they could not do that. And so visualize bringing everything back to the home. So there is a linguist named Barbara Meek, who in a book called We Are Our Language, she said, 20 years ago, the language was in the home, but never in the school. Now the language is in the school, was never in the home. And so like really looking at that kind of stuff and just continuing to see these things and how it's all interconnected and how you make sure you have an indigenous worldview. Because all of this stuff, colonization, and so colonization is, we'll talk about what is colonization, and we can have our own individual definitions, and I'll tell you what mine is, and what is modernity, and what is hegemony. Those are probably my three big things that I focus on when I look at this stuff. Colonization is people coming here and taking the land and subjugating the people, and then trying to genocide the people's very existence. That for me is colonization. It's a lot more complicated than that, but if I were to say, what is it? That would be my short answer. My short answer for what is modernity, it's this idea that all of humanity is on this continuum of progress, getting better and better and better and better, and you can measure everybody on that scale based on where you are. We did this thing, we look, those guys didn't do this thing yet, so they're back here, primitive peoples. I think those are very destructive and Eurocentric modes of thinking. And what is hegemony? Hegemony is usually this idea that you're doing, I think it's the thing that keeps people from taking the leap. If you want to become a speaker of a language, you have to absolutely decolonize your mind so you can think in the indigenous language. And I think there are a whole bunch of mechanisms that keep people from doing that. So I think that's probably one of the driving reasons why people quit the language programs or want to go back and take one class over again, or they take it and then they don't speak the language. We can talk about all that stuff too. But we're going to go over this throughout the whole semester, but I know there's a couple of things we touched on, and I want to just sort of talk about them real quick and come back to them, and then switch over to the readings because they're really important. I want to see what everyone thought of them.
I think modernity is the end point of progressivism. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah, I
a
think
little different than what you said, maybe, but
Okay.
related.
Everybody's going on the same
Yeah.
trajectory. Absolutely. Sheesh. So what I'm always interested in acquisition and usage. That's probably two of my primary areas that I focus on. Acquisition means how are people learning the language and how are they learning the language? Usage is are people using the language? Corpus is what is the language written? Is there a way to write it? Have we standardized it? Are we modernizing it? Are we coming up with new words for things like microphone and whatever? Status is sort of like where is the language in terms of do you see it? Is it used in places? Does it have function? Is it part of the standards? And then prestige is sort of like do people value it? And so I look, and all these things are interconnected. At the center is your work, which is policy and planning. We'll talk about all this stuff, but there were a couple things I think that were really important that we did talk about, which is prestige, which is you have to, there's this disillusion, right? There's these colonial value systems, which I think over and over and over, there's a lot of people who have told me or said, well, the indigenous languages, no one attacked them. They just fell out of use because, people had to get with the modern world, right? And this is the things that a lot of people need to tell themselves, I think, to not examine colonial genocide. But on the other side of that is what Pilo Wilson, or Dr. William Wilson, called re-vernacularization. This means what do people talk about on a day-to-day basis, and let's teach them how to do that. You like to talk about the weather, grandkids, kids, like community. There's a lot of community information, like who's having a baby, and who broke up, and who got together, and like all that stuff. Like there's a bunch of stuff. Some of it can fall in the category of gossip, which could be good or bad. But still, we got to do, and if that's what people want to talk about, people want to flirt, people want to get together, people want to hook up, people want to do it, people want to have friends, people want to get mad, people want to fight. Like, do people know how to have an argument in your language without causing a huge war? And I think those things sort of lead to like, what do we need to do to bring our language program from constant field of study to a constant field of use and existence? And so those are things I think about an awful lot. I talk about all this stuff through the whole semester, and I will give you all the images. I'll tell you everything I have figured out, and we can disagree sometimes about finer points and have different viewpoints on different things. But as far as when I look at the big picture of things, these are the things that I like to think about. I will share a few more thoughts with you folks as the weeks go on. But we read a couple things. So let me ask you folks this. I'm going to jump around just a little bit.
What would you call microphone? A two-day a
Tunach.
tunach. Okay.
That was it. Yeah, we named that thing in a class. It was fun. We had like 7, 8 elders there. It was really fun. Has anybody seen this map before?
Yeah.
Maybe. So when I was doing some teaching a while back and I started reading about California, and as far as North America goes, California was the most diverse, the most linguistically diverse part of North America. It's had the most languages packed into a small space. If you look at the world, it's a country called Papua New Guinea, which is about the size of California and has, I think, about 800 languages. So linguistic diversity for me is really interesting. But also what's interesting to me is the state of the languages in California, which is extremely endangered. And so I bring this up because the two articles that we read were both had to do with folks who do their work in California. I thought it was a neat place to start, and so if we're going to start there, let's look at this map. Let's, as far as any people who are Tlingit speakers or any Dene language, you got some relatives over here too in terms of cousin languages. And so it's really interesting to sort of look at those things. So kind of a lot of these languages right here on the coast, and some of these also extend up into Oregon as well. So thinking about these, about California, these two articles, one making speakers, and the other was how to teach, what was it, How to Teach When the Teacher Isn't Fluent by Leanne Hinton. Let's just start here. Any just general thoughts, reactions to these two articles?
The one by Leanne Hinton reminded me of where are your keys and the idea that you don't need to know a lot of your language to teach others, but that, some terms are essential so that you don't switch back to English or your trade language, mostly like classroom management phrases and stuff like that. So I think it kind of inspired me to try to get those terms down pat.
Yeah, in terms of being able to function in a classroom, being able to do some things. I have heard several times people say you don't need to be, and I also, let's talk about the F word here for a second. The F word is fluent. Okay, to do the work that we do, I think we're continually going to have to examine the English language and the terms that we use and the way that we use those terms. I would recommend, even though I do it all the time, I would recommend you try not to use the word fluent, but you try to switch to the word fluency so that you have a gradient. Because even if you have speakers, I know people that I would say they speak the Tlingit language, but then I know this person might be able to do an awful lot more with the language than this person. And it's usually stories and translations, and if you got really complicated concepts, you got to go to this person. So even among birth speakers, I think there should be a little bit of work done to determine a scale of fluency, which is a very delicate thing. People will cry about it in good ways to say, I did all this work, I can't believe I'm this level, or I did all this work, I can't believe I'm way down here, I feel like giving up. So within your program, you should be able to have a rough definition. For what we do in Tlingit is we have it on a scale of 1 to 10 for second language learners. We could develop a different scale for birth speakers, so that but also I think there should be conversations about who does the assessments, who shares that information, who has access to that information. I think on a one-on-one basis, it's very helpful. I think if everybody has access to it, you increase the likelihood that people are going to have hurt feelings. However, I think the way that Indigenous identity is legislated, I had to send my certificate of Indian blood to somebody today. And I think because that identity is already legislated, I think the word fluent is used as a way to say, can you do this? Are you qualified to do this? Because people would say it to me all the time, especially 10, 15 years ago, as I started to teach the Tlingit language more and more. I said, oh, are you fluent? And I'd usually say, I could speak it. I don't know. But I think the other thing is, it's another one of these binary things. Like there's this light switch that suddenly comes on, and you're capital F fluent all of a sudden. I don't like that concept. I do think it is limiting. I think it's a gateway type of thing. And it's similar to these other things, like talking about how difficult the language is, like we were talking about earlier. It's difficult to move from English to an Indigenous language because you have to decolonize. Because the very language of English came here to wipe everything out. And so to move the other direction is a monumental thing. Anybody got any thoughts on that stuff? Also back to the articles. And I've got a few other things I want to talk about as well.
Yeah, I'll add that, I think it's interesting when you're running a program and you're working with first language speakers, because there is a spectrum, absolutely, between someone who was raised for their first 20 years outside of a village, even fully in the language, and someone who maybe was raised in the language in a village, but during a time where they were also forced to go to English school for 6 hours a day or 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And so I think for us, it's been important just to have those open conversations with everybody, and kind of all of us actually along the spectrum of second language learners to first language speakers, kind of have had to kind of self-assess, is the way it happens, I guess, within our community, of like, where are we really at with our language knowledge and journey, and then just learn to have open conversations with each other, and then knowing who are the people that hold the highest level of knowledge and understanding in regards to different facets of the language. For example, the best speller of our language is a different person than the best, most knowledgeable speaker of our language. But we all kind of have a sense of who those folks are. And so I think there's a lot of humbling and self-humbling practice and exercises that are a part of doing this work across those spectrums. It's really interesting to hear that you all created a scale of kind of assessment, because I don't think we're there yet. But at some point in time, I think that could be important for us to do. And then also I concur with the comment in the chat that someone wrote about the focus on verbs. And I love the term you introduced that Pila shared, the vernacularization of the language, because that's absolutely what we're learning in the Chato that we have to do. Like every day, the kids are teaching us what new language, phrase, and command we need to learn how to say, even though they're not verbal. They're now starting to become, one speaks, the other three don't speak at all yet, any language. And so we just through expression are having to learn very rapidly, how to say things. We want to say it accurately. And so when we're not sure, even though we have a first language speaking teacher, and if her and I aren't clear on it, then we go to kind of the two elders that are our main teachers of the language, to make sure that we're accurately communicating what it is that we're wanting to communicate and say. Anyhow, but I thought the articles were both great.
Yeah, I went 24 years of learning Tlingit and using it before I ever learned how to say flush the toilet. And so like there's a whole bunch of stuff. And I remember one time I read this article, another book by Leanne Hinton called Bringing Our Languages Home. And it was a Maori scholar who raises her children in her language. And she says, you think you know a lot until your kid asks you where does the water go when you flush the toilet, and you got to tell them in your language. And I was like, not even a week later, I was driving with my kids, and we drove past a fish hatchery, and my daughter was very little, maybe 1, and she said, or maybe 2, she said, swimming pool. I was like, no, and I said it in Tlingit. I said, that's where the baby fish, baby salmon live. And she said, oh, with their mommies and their daddies. And I thought, I gotta explain the whole salmon cycle. So I just went for it and taken your language, and there's also gonna be a lot of reconstruction for the language community. Depending on the state of your language. If you have a whole bunch of people who speak it all the time, then they probably know how to do an awful lot of stuff. But you might have to figure out how to talk about where does the water go and what's that whole process. And so it's really exciting, but also challenging. And I think a couple other words that I think we should, so fluency is out. I think. I think or fluent, sorry, not fluency. The word fluent, I just think consider using it less. I think another word that should probably be on its way out is the word Western, because I think Western is a way academics codes white. And we talk about this too, and a lot of people don't even mean to. They'll just say, yeah, this is but when we started examining I started examining our academic catalog at UAS, there's a bunch of classes that would say intro to this, intro to that, like intro to history, intro to art. And if you read the course description, the word Western would just be in it. And it's like, okay, this is extremely Eurocentric. And so and there was Western and Eastern, but what about, where's Africa and where's the indigenous peoples? And so what else can we, and these are conversations that I think need to be done. And Looking at the chat, yeah, we got a big group of elders together. We're asking all these phrases so we raise kids in the language and build a language nest. We get stuck on change the diaper. And one elder afterwards, she started crying. She said, I felt like I was back in boarding school and that person's going to hit me again because I can't remember how to say it because we haven't raised babies in 60 years in the language. And so, yeah, let's see. I think another one, we used to say language preservation. Now I think we're talking about saving languages. And I think it's time to just come up with another term for that, which maybe is just integrate. We got to integrate them because they're on the margins of a lot of stuff right now. And so revitalize, bring them back. But there's a whole bunch of terms. We'll talk about terms all semester too. Yeah, thank you. I'm just catching up on the chat too.
I think that article is a great resource that I could share with teachers. And I think it would be awesome to have like a training program at the schools to have the teachers who are non-Indigenous be able to go through that and learn those classroom management terms and become learners. Like you said, I think every teacher should have, like I try to model what the teachers should be doing. They should take classes and learn about cultures and know the languages and the peoples of Alaska, and they should be especially not proficient, but gain knowledge in the area of their place so that they can model whatever what we're asking our teachers to do. But I think that's almost like a blueprint to say, learn these, and that person can assist the language teacher. So all of the teachers could become involved and maybe it could grow from there. But I think that was an excellent article, and thank you for sharing that.
Wonderful. So let's see, here's some other notes that I was sort of taking, going through. So just sort of making sure that we're building our understanding of these terms and how they generally work for the work that we're trying to do. What is the differences between language stabilization, revitalization, revival? Those are three related terms. And so stabilization means a whole bunch of people already speak the language. We're trying to keep it that way. Revitalization means there's fewer and fewer people, so we're trying to get more and more people. Revival means nobody speaks it anymore. We're bringing it back from 0 speakers, which can happen. So I think it's important to understand the differences between those terms, just because we would have some elders here who get really mad because they'd hear the term revitalization and they'd say, it's not dead. And so I'd say, okay, oh yeah, no. We're just saying revitalization means we're trying to get it back to a stable place. And just sort of just making sure we all understand what these terms are and which phase we're kind of in. Because the other thing, I think sometimes the roadmap to go from very few speakers to many is not always clear, but I think you could say, well, here's the things that worked in these other places. And if you're at this point, you try to get to this point. And it's not always, it's like there's a mountaintop, there's a whole bunch of different ways to get there. For me, a language program would be all, like if you take Gwich'in or if you took Dena'ina or any language, like what is every single thing that's doing the work in that language? That should collectively be the program. And sometimes a lot of our work is putting those things together, because you might have someone teaching Haida and Heidelberg and someone teaching Haida and Masset, and are they talking to each other? Are they working together? Are they uniting? And same with here. You've got probably 40, 50 different programs, and how often do they sort of talk to each other and figure some stuff out? The language movement, I guess maybe I had those backwards, sorry. The language movement is all of those things. The language program for me would be one particular thing, and one or two is sort of organizations. Like UAS has a language program, Alaska Heritage Institute has a language program, and then those things combine and have a language movement. And the movement would also include everybody who speaks it, teaches it, uses it. And so just sometimes we think about what's the work that needs to be done within each of these things. Let's see. There's a language school Oops, living with the language should be its own kind of thing. And language school should be here. There. So living with the language and creating the social change to help that happen, I think we consider things that need to happen with individuals and families. How do we get our families to just use the language? How do we get individuals to use the language? At the community and within organizations, let's change the street signs. Let's get it into the school. Let's get it into the workplace. Like if we have a certification for a speaker, could we get organizations in our community to say, this job pays $45,000 a year. However, if you have a certificate in Alaska Native languages, it pays 50. Just make it a value thing. And then there's the changes that need to happen at the governmental level. And there's always lots of those. And it depends who's the governor, it depends who's the tribal president, it depends who's the CEO, because those values might change. But we're always thinking of what are the things we need to do at those levels. Let me keep the chat open, make sure. And let me just check in too, because I know I'm going over a bunch of stuff. Wonderful. Qayana, Susu. Okay, anybody have any thoughts? Okay, let me keep going. Jump in. And so sometimes I get some things I want to share. Always feel free to just jump on it if you got a thought, question, and especially if I'm saying something and you think, I'm not sure I understand, I haven't heard that before, well, let's just talk about it. Don't let anything fly by. All we're trying to do is sort of just go over some of these initial concepts and continue to tie these readings back to program building. Like how do you build like a lasting program so that 30 years from now, it's that thing, it's that dream that you can see to just sort of, you go Hawaii, you see Aha Punana, you see Navihi, you see Kahakaula Oke Ilikelani, and it's amazing. But if you go back 30, 40 years ago, it's a one room and a little office downtown. And some people literally breaking the law to bring their language back. That's what it was. So when we talk about a language school, there's various levels, and I would say the highest level in terms of language stability is called medium education. That means you would be a language medium school. What would that mean if you're a Nukpiaq? That means we are a school that's K through 12, and every single thing is taught in our language. We teach English through a Nukpiaq. That's how kids learn English here. We teach Yupik through a Nukpiaq. And so everything is taught through the language all day long. That is a language medium school. So immersion education is, and so a medium school, a big difference. You come to this school, you already know the language. We're teaching you through the language. You want to learn the language, you got to go to the immersion school. So the medium school teaches through the language. The immersion school teaches the language. And it could be an adult immersion program. They have one in Mohawk. So if you don't know the Mohawk language, you can apply to go to their adult immersion program and you go live for 2 years in a house where everybody speaks Mohawk and learns Mohawk. And if you had a school, you'd say, okay, we're taking these kids, they don't know Tsimshian, but we're going to teach them Tsimshian, and then we're going to send them to the medium school so they go learn about the world through Tsimshian. But usually immersion programs for people who don't always know the language. An immersion gathering is different. That's saying we're going to get together and really push ourselves to not use any English. But it's not really a school, it's like a gathering, part of the language program. Dual language education means we teach, maybe we spend 4 hours a day in English and 4 hours a day in Navajo. That's the way our whole school works. And but it doesn't even have to, you can say we spend 1 whole hour in Koyukon, and then we spend the other 7 hours in English. That's still dual language, but it's not, you're spending the whole time, you're teaching through the language, communicating through the language, something like that. Then you can have a school where Indigenous language is a subject in an English language medium school. So they have 5 periods a day of courses that are entirely in English. Then they have this one course where their language is taught, probably through English, which is most commonly the case. Then you can have Indigenous culture as a subject in a language medium school. That means historically, kids would have like an Indian studies hour where they'd learn the art, they'd learn the dancing, they'd learn some language, everything gets smushed together in this 1 hour. And if you go back 20, 30 years, that was just for the native kids, usually. And so what we're trying to do is sort of, and you can figure out where you are and you can set goals on how to move to the different levels. And then there's also, and this one's not lesser than the others, but it's different, community language learning. Every night one night a week we get together and we just try and study our Dena'ina language. And it's not always a structured program. You learn a little bit, you use a little bit, but it's community activity. And that can certainly supplement everything and can really help with getting to day-to-day language. Any questions about that? Okay.
For community language learning sessions, that's kind of what we're doing for Danaka. And is it possible to set it up so that no 1 or 2 people has to be there consistently to host it? Like, can you set up like a self-guided study group?
I do think that's pretty critical if you don't have someone who's like, if someone doesn't have, that's not their full-time job to keep that thing going, then I think you have to figure that out. And one of the things could be working with some partners and getting a group of people and getting them some sort of pay so that it's work. I mean, I continue to come back to like, let's not just make it a volunteer thing. But the other thing is, like in the Northwest Coast, you build houses with house posts. So every house usually had 4 house posts. You put the house posts up, then you put a roof, and then you build the outside. But sometimes we build a whole language program with 1 or 2 house posts. And like, would this fall apart if something horrible happened and we lost somebody? Is it self-sustaining? Because we want to put up house posts, build houses, and build communities and feel like this thing is good enough to go. But maybe the starting point would be getting a group of 4 to 6 people who understand I need to be on call because the language gathering is happening. Because if you start the language gathering and you're starting to get interest and you're starting to get some momentum, you don't want to have this situation come up. Okay, we got to skip this week because I got to travel, and so it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And then maybe someone starts to feel a little guilty, or maybe it's a little easy. It's always, I think, it's always easier to not do the thing, because then you just get colonized and you just go with the hegemony, which teaches you that that's the easy way to go. But I think setting it up so that it always goes no matter what. And maybe you have these tiers of folks, like your tier 1 folks are your primary coordinators and teachers, and they get paid per session. And then you've got a next group down, which are your advanced language learners who can step in a pinch and say, well, these other folks, they couldn't be here tonight, so I'm taking it over. And we're going to work on this stuff. And then keep it that way, and then continue to ask yourselves, what are we doing to make this the most wonderful place to be? And some people get a little mad at me when we'd have native gatherings because there'd be the language thing, and I'd say, put the best coffee and the best food in that room. And I'm not saying that people can't come. I'm saying send them in, get them in there, find the things that they want and get them in there.
Like egg and cheese.
I think one of the challenges we've had is there are not a lot of advanced language learners that feel prepared, or they might feel prepared, but some of our more advanced learners and instructors are nervous about them being instructing others not accurately in how to say things and how to speak the language. And so it's interesting because we're right in that moment actually where we're pausing for a couple of weeks, in part because we're trying to get Delta COVID safe. So we're shifting to Zoom from in person for this fall with our weekly kind of classes. Parents classes is what we're doing. And but yeah, no, this conversation is an important one and significant, I think, for what we're going through right now, of just like who are the few people that we feel comfortable with leading, and are they readily available week to week to be able to lead them. And so anyhow, right now we're with 2 people that feel comfortable leading, and I think we need to find a third or fourth, so that, or do we just leave the space open for learners to practice with each other, even if there is no one that's an advanced learner or teacher able to be there that given week.
Yeah, these are really wonderful points. And I'll share with you folks exactly what we've done to figure out how to do assessments and let folks know about where they're at as their fluency levels. It's not the greatest system there is, but it's a system that I think does function. That way there's some clarity about you're here, you work on this stuff, and then you're going to be here. Because if we all just introduce ourselves and say, okay, say your name, say where you're from, and tell people whether you're beginning, intermediate, or advanced, almost everybody would say beginner. Even people who've been studying the language, they give this big, wonderful speech in the language and say, I'm just a beginner. And I understand that, because that's often how we feel. And we also don't want to stand up and feel like we're bragging about how great we are in the language, right? So to sort of get around some of those things and navigate it takes just a little bit of work, and it takes some practice, and also it takes just sort of really moving away from competitive environments as well, which I love basketball and I love hockey. I like to win. Sometimes I find myself bringing that into environments. Like I had a student who asked me, like, who's the better speaker, you or that person? And I actually answered that question in a way that when they told me about it later, I was like, did I say that? What a goofball. I wish I had just said, we just speak the language. There's no competition. And so, but on the other end of that too, we had to do a lot of work to just be okay with making mistakes. This idea really persists that if there's a mistake, someone said you're building your castle in the sand. They were being super dramatic about it to me, and I said, that's really dramatic. No, you gotta make sure things keep going. It's better to say something than nothing. Like, what do we call this? I don't know. Let's call it this for now. And then later we might have to change what we call it because we went to the elders and they said, nah, this sounds better. But it's not like we're going out and doing it any old way. But the envisioning going from a language of non-use to use, such a monumental jump. All of a sudden there's all these things you've never had to say. I walked by these kids saying, and they were building a snowman. I was like, how would you say that? Because in our language, snowman sounds an awful lot like white man. And so trying to figure out how to say that, and it was really kind of fun. And then we cooked up a word for snowman later. Snow person, I don't know. And then, so these are some things. And then we also had to convince some of our speakers to let there be times where no one's correcting anybody. Just let everything go. And I think it's very hard because of this mentality that we're losing everything. And now if we get it wrong, it's going to be wrong forever. And then generations from now it'll amplify. I think we have to move away from some of that stuff. Not to say we're not about getting it correct. But if you can value communication over perfection, I think you're moving in the right direction.
Really quick, I know we're running out of time, but the second article, the how to teach when the teacher is an F word, there things in that are mentioned. It says you can do as little as 1 or 2 words and just build off of that with what you know. it mentions that in kind of a passing of like, you can do it as little as that. When you have beginning teachers, or you're leaning on people in your community group and things like that, that's the best thing you can do. And we've had a lot of success with that in our group. And yeah, that article had a lot of great things that we're currently working through. And recently, when we put up some stuff to an advanced teacher that we were working on, what they did more than anything was pare it down. Don't overwhelm, because we're student, ourselves. So we're trying to pass along all the different tenses and all the different ways to say things, where they were like, no, take one thing and just walk it through first person. The rest of that'll come conversationally later. You don't bog down and overwhelm. So that paring it down really, and being able to build a lesson off of that is just good advice. And yeah, I think it's something that's going to help a lot of folks that are in these community groups trying to build more and keep a space for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And just getting away from this idea that you have to be the master of the thing in order to, and sometimes I'm just a discussion leader. That's all I'm doing here, is we're just talking about some stuff and sharing the language. Because I think, again, there's this mentality, there's all these mechanisms. Maybe I'm my own brand of conspiracy theorist, but there's all these mechanisms that have been put into place to keep us from doing things. So when someone stands up to do something, like 8 people in the room will be thinking, who do they think they are to do something? Where it's like, well, something needed to be done. Why don't we all just do the thing? And so.
I just wanted a quick jump onto that because I had a young boy today who shared that he taught his mom Gaidanak and Gaike, and he wanted to know the next word. And it made me think, it was Tlake. That's what he wanted to teach his mom. No, which I thought was really cute. But anyway, I was thinking like Flipgrid, like sending something home in a media way of like, okay, do Gaidanak, so you have to have more than one person to do that, and Gaike, more than one person to sit, and then also single. And so they have to get their family members involved and just do a video. And so I'm thinking that's going to be the next thing, is we teach it, we sing it, we make it a game, and then it goes home in a sort of an invitation to teach your family and do it with your family and send it back. And last year we did digital badges, and the kids loved them because they were little kind of reminders of the language that they could share with their families. So yeah, I think that paring it down is a really good advice.
So before we go, can I get 3 volunteers to put together a presentation for us next week on total physical response? And again, you don't have to master the thing. You just say, hey, I just went out and looked for some stuff, and here's what I found. And all we're going to do is have a conversation about TPR, what it is, how do we use it. And so we're every other week, I think, if we look at the syllabus, is we're just going to take a look at a particular method. And I'll just continue to stress, like, a single method is not how an entire program should run. But maybe like this is how we like to get stuff started. These are things to put in your toolbox. These are not the foundations of the whole program. I just want to make sure that we're clear about that. They are wonderful. Utilize them. But what I'm going to look for is like, where does this come from? What is it about? How could it be used? And that's all I'm really looking for. And then just, don't go crazy. Just find a website, find a couple of articles. Don't go try and read like some 300-page book about what the thing is. Just get an idea. You're not supposed to teach us what TPR is. Not at all. If we want to do that, we go hire someone, bring him in, and maybe we'll do that at a future date. You're just going to go out, find a few things, work together as a team of 3 people to put together a short 5 to 10 minute, just a short presentation. I don't have any time limit I want to put on. And then we're all going to talk about it. What is it? What do we know about it? How can we use it? Anybody want to do that? And once you do 3, you can, I'll come up with a sign-in sheet next week, but I need 3 to do this one.
I could do it. Go
Okay.
to Stephen.
Like working together to present? Okay. I can't decide. I'll do it. Why not?
Let me tell you what someone asked me
We
today.
have to do one eventually, right? So might as well.
Yeah, someone asked me today, do you want to do this and will you do it? I said no and sure. So there we go. All right, thanks. We got our 3. We'll go over that again on Monday. Don't freak out. It's not any sort of, there's no grade. You're just, you're the scouts for the week to go scout it out, come back, tell us what you found.
Who are the 3?
Let's see. Who was the first? I have Heather and tell me your Schmelgach name again.
Godum Teben.
Adam Teben and Nawea.
And this is Wednesday. We don't have school. We don't have class on Monday.
We have no class on Monday. Yeah, so enjoy your Labor Day. Don't come here. Go do something. Relax. Again, we are not in any hurry at all this semester. I just want to keep stressing that. We'll see you folks in a week.
Anna, thank you.
Aquayana.
Goodness, geez.
Geesh.